What's up, guys? Welcome back to DCS World. Welcome back aboard the Hornet for another video. Today we're going to take a look at the AIM-120 Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile, also known as the AMRAAM. A fun word to say, right? What the Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile, or AMRAAM, is a fully active radar homing missile, or ARH missile, also known as a Fox 3 type missile. What does that mean? Well, if you remember from the Sparrow video, we talked about semi-active radar homing and that the missile required a radar lock from launch all the way until impact on the target, flood mode aside. With the AIM-120, the missile itself, and you can actually see it on my wing there, has its own radar seeker head. What this allows the missile to do is it allows to use its own radar to track a target independent of our airplane's radar. This allows us to fire the missile, and then after a certain point, we can then turn away from the target and the missile will continue to guide itself to the target. This is the biggest difference and one of the biggest advantages of using a active radar homing missile as opposed to a semi-active radar homing missile. Now, the way we use the missile is very similar to the Sparrow initially. What we're going to do first is make sure we get our master arm on, select air-to-air mode, and then we're going to use our weapon select switch to select AMRAAM. And let's take a look at the symbology that we have. Up on the HUD, we have a targeting circle here, and I'll explain what this circle itself represents shortly. We see AC6, so we have AMRAAM variant C, so AIM-120C, and we have 6 of them on the aircraft, and we're currently in visual mode. But we'll talk about visual mode in a little bit. The AIM-120 also comes in a B variant, so an AIM-120B. The difference between the AIM-120B and the AIM-120C are fairly minimal. The AIM-120B has a little bit more maneuverability because it has full-sized maneuvering fins. The AIM-120C has clipped maneuvering fins, which reduce its maneuverability, but also increase its range. It also, supposedly, based on what you can read, has a slightly more advanced seeker head. But for the purposes of DCS, they function relatively the same. Let's look down at our stores page. We have S mode option, manual auto, currently not implemented, but this is for, I believe, data tracking purposes, so we don't need to touch anything here. Similarly to the AIM-7, we have a size function, so a rough target size. We can select small, medium, and large. For our purposes, we're going to select small. We also have an option here for RCS. This stands for radar cross-section. Now, we can denote targets that might have different sized radar cross-sections. So a fighter-sized target might also have a small radar cross-section. A larger target, such as a transport airplane, might have a medium or large-sized radar cross-section, but it could also be something such as a stealth bomber, like a B-2. That might be a large target, but it also might have a small radar cross-section. So something to bear in mind is that different targets might be different sized and have different radar cross-sections. For our purposes, we're going to select small radar cross-section as well. Now let's maneuver and find some targets. So stand by while I get in range of something to shoot. Alright, so I've got some targets on the radar here about 20 miles ahead of us. So I'm going to get one locked up. So I've got a target lock. So quick pause again just to take a look at the symbology. Similarly to the Sparrow, we have some information on the stores page about some of the different launch parameters. Very similar to the Sparrow. As well as on the HUD, we have the ASE, acceptable steering error circle, as well as our ranging carrots for R max, R no escape, and R min. We also have our closure rate and range once again, as well as a radar lock. We also have a active indication here. Now, when I mentioned before that the AIM-120 is an active radar homing missile, it is not fully active radar homing directly off of the rails when we launch it with a radar lock. The missile itself is going to be guided by our own radar until a predetermined point, at which the missile is then going to be commanded to go active. This is also known as commanding the missile to go pitbull. This is when the missile turns on its own radar and continues tracking itself towards the target without need for our own radar to continue guiding it. As you can see here, this missile will go active roughly 22 seconds after launch. And then once the missile goes active, this will change to a TTG, time to go, similarly to the Sparrow. However, at that point, we don't need to keep the target locked. So let's see if we can demonstrate that here. So I've got a target locked here. I've got a shoot cue, but if you notice, I'm actually well outside R and E. So we're going to need to get a little bit closer. One thing I should also point out, on the ASE, you see this arrow pointing up. That's telling me the relative aspect of the aircraft that I'm targeting. Right now, this target is flying away from us because the arrow is pointing up. If the target was flying towards me, the arrow would be pointing down. And that applies to all of the radar-guided missiles. I did not mention that in the Sparrow video. Sorry about that. Continue flying here. When the target is flying away from us, it does shorten the range quite a bit. All right, I don't want to get too much closer because we may go actually inside of the self-guided range, but I do want to shoot this missile so you can see what the symbology looks like before it goes pitbull. So we'll call Fox 3 and fire, and let's quick pause. We see our time to active. The missile is currently flying towards the target. If I look down at the radar, we see similar symbology to the Sparrow with the indication of the missile itself, as well as the target. So let's unpause and see what this missile does. I was a little out of parameters, so we'll see what happens. We're within 10 miles, so it's pretty close. There goes the missile. The AIM-120 does have a smokeless rocket motor. The missile is now active, so I'm going to leave the target locked, but it should hit. And splash. So I'm going to unlock that target. I'm going to get a little distance from these targets here, and we're going to try again. And I'm going to show you that if I unlock the target after I fire, the missile should still guide itself to the target. So stand by while I get some distance. All right, so I've got a new target. And Fox 3. And as soon as the missile goes active, I'm going to unlock the target. Missile is now active. Unlock the target. And the disadvantage of unlocking the target is that we no longer get the time to impact information. But we can actually see the missile out in front of us with the labels there, so hopefully that'll hit. And splash. Now, one other way we can launch the missile, as you notice when we first selected it, we have this targeting circle on the HUD with the dashed lines, as well as AC5 and visual. We can launch the missile without a radar lock at all. And what that's going to cause to happen is that the missile is going to activate its radar straight off of the rail. This is known as firing the missile Mad Dog. Firing it without a radar lock is somewhat risky in that the missile itself, its own radar, doesn't know friend from foe, and it could actually track a friendly aircraft if there's one in vicinity. So let's get turned around here. The range of the missile gets shortened substantially when it's fired in a Mad Dog sort of scenario. So we don't need to be too far away from these targets. Alright, we've got this guy right off our nose here. We're going to wait until he's inside our circle. And Fox 3 visual. Oh, it didn't actually go after the intended target. See, that's what can happen. It's not going after him, it's going after a guy off in the distance there. Let's see if it hits that guy in the distance. Splash. Alright, so that's the two ways that we can launch the missile right now in DCS. We can fire it with a SDT lock, similarly to a Sparrow, and then it will go active after a certain point. We can fire it with no lock in what's known as a Mad Dog launch scenario. Eventually, we will be able to fire these missiles with a track while scan setup, which means we can track individual targets. I believe it's going to be up to 20, but I'll have to verify that. We will be able to track and individually launch missiles on individual targets using track while scan. But that's not available to us yet in DCS, so stay tuned for that in a future video. But for now, that's the basics of using the AMRAAM on the Hornet in DCS. Get out there and practice and try it out, and we'll see you for the next video. Take care.